Radio hosts, as well as Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Bishop Kevin Rhodes, and Father Mike Schmidt. Use promo code Easter and book by April 30th to save $100 per person. Cabins are filling up fast. Book your spot now to get your preferred choice. Faith and fun on the sea and in the sun. Click the travel tab at AveMariaRadio.net. The Encounter Conference, June 26th through the 28th at the New Glass City Center in Toledo, Ohio. 15 powerful speakers.
It is the encounter with the Holy Spirit that makes Jesus come alive and gives us the courage and the wisdom to go forth and to even risk our own lives.
Everyone pretty much says the miracles that Jesus did are real. The miracles that the early church did are real.
As often as the popes are talking about the new evangelization, they're also saying we need to pray for a new Pentecost. We need to return to the upper room. Encounter represents the church returning to the upper room. As we're coming boldly before God and asking Him to renew that Pentecostal fire for the strength, the gifts, and the wisdom to be able to preach Jesus to a lost and broken world so that we can become fully alive in Him, so that the world may come to believe that Jesus is the one whom God sent.
Register today at EncounterConference.org. That's EncounterConference.org.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
God bless you, Dr. Ray. You've changed a lot of lives for the better, my friend, and keep at it.
Thank you so much for joining me on The Doctor Is In. It is a great privilege, truly is, to be able to do this program. Truly. I just finished my Diet Coke, which, I don't really want to complain, but sometimes I have to put it, like, toward the computer monitor, so I have to stretch to get it. Yeah, life's tough, but for me, it's all about commitment. I don't have time to do any more look back calls. The one I wanted to go to up there was a 4-minute call, and as I look at the clock here, I'm looking at about 3 minutes. So I want to read something by C.S. Lewis, as I frequently do. This is from Mere Christianity. A silly idea is current that good people do not know what temptation means. This is an obvious lie. Only those who try to resist temptation know how strong it is. A man who gives in to temptation after 5 minutes simply does not know what it would have been like an hour later. That is why bad people, in one sense, know very little about badness. They have lived a sheltered life by always giving in. You don't know how strong temptation can threaten to overwhelm you if you don't let it overwhelm you. If at any point along the line you give in, then you never really felt the full effect, the full strength of that temptation. An analogy was drawn, I think, some other place in Lewis's writing where he said, you don't realize how strong an army is if you surrender to it. If you resist it all the way to the end, you'll find out absolutely how strong it is. Good people resist temptation all the way to its maximum strength and don't give in to it. Of course, Scripture's clear. The Lord doesn't let us be tempted beyond our ability. That would be kind of unfair, wouldn't it? If, in fact, temptation was so strong that there was absolutely nothing you could do about it, that would be kind of putting you in a tricky situation. So Lewis makes the point. Temptation that is strong can get stronger when you resist it. Say, if you're a guy and you've had trouble with pornography and your wife has left the house and you know what the password is on that computer that she put on there. You've discovered it somehow. And you know she's going to be gone for an hour. And you're just not going to go, you're not going to go near that computer. And as the time passes and you try to distract yourself, you immerse, you pray, you find that temptation is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it probably reaches its peak, at least, when she finally walks in the door, because you resisted it the whole time she was gone. If at any point during that hour she was gone, you went to that computer, you gave in. And you gave in at a point where the temptation was not at its full power. You didn't realize how strong it could be. You said to yourself, no, it got overwhelming, I gave in. No, it didn't get overwhelming, because the real overwhelming was yet to come, or the real strength was yet to come. Thanks for joining me here on The Doctor Is In on this Look Back Friday. So very much appreciate your company, good Lord permitting. I'll talk to you on Monday. Thank you, Andrew Kruchek, for all you do over there in Ann Arbor. Walk with God. That is the strength you need to overcome the strongest of temptations.
For information on Dr. Ray's presentations, books, and CDs, visit drray.com and follow him on Facebook and Instagram. The Doctor Is In is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Transmitting the treasures of our Catholic faith to your radio every day. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Guadalupe Radio Network wants you to know
one cannot believe in Jesus Christ without sharing in His Spirit. It is the Holy Spirit who reveals to men who Jesus is. For no one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit, who searches everything, even the depths of God. No one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Only God knows God completely. We believe in the
Surviving Divorce is a 12-week program that will bring hope and healing to those who have experienced the pain and loneliness of a broken marriage. Surviving Divorce features video presentations that cover topics such as shock and grief, dealing with children, a former spouse, annulment, and remarriage. Find answers to questions, restore hope, and begin authentic healing. The course begins on Tuesday, May 7th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Holy Family Catholic Church in Irving. To register, go to holyfamilychurch.net/separated-divorced.
The Guadalupe Radio Network thanks Homeschool Connections for their support of Catholic radio. They are an online Catholic course provider for grade school, middle, and high school age students. You can put your students in touch with Joseph Pierce, Gary Mashuda, Aaron M. Brown, and other such instructors of a variety of subjects such as theology and philosophy, math, English, history, and the languages. More information is available at homeschoolconnections.com. That's homeschoolconnections.com.
What was I going to do with a baby?
I was too young to be a mother.
They said I had a choice.
The timing was all wrong.
I had hopes and dreams for my life.
They said it would be the best thing for me to do.
So why do I regret my decision every single day?
Where did all of my hopes and dreams go?
I've never felt so alone.
Why won't the shame go away?
They said it would be easy. It isn't.
Are you suffering from a past abortion? If you are, you may feel alone, but you're not. There are people who understand and can help. Call 214-544-CARE or go to racheldallas.org.
Thanks for listening to KATH 910 AM Frisco, Dallas, Fort Worth on the Guadalupe Radio Network in North Texas. Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on our final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now, here's your host, Dave Palmer.
And welcome to Back to the Father here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. I'm Dave Palmer, as Stan just said, joined with Cecil Anderson here at the North Texas office of the Guadalupe Radio Network, where we do this show every Friday at 1 o'clock Central Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. And the tagline is putting the fun into Thomistic philosophy. And I don't even know why you have to say that. Thomistic philosophy is fun in and of itself. You don't have to do anything extra, right, to make it fun. It's going to be kind of an interesting show because I understand that we are not going to be able to put our PowerPoint presentation up on the screen, which means that you're going to end up looking at me and every now and then Cecil, and no cool graphics, and so we'll try to get that worked out between now and the next show. But and I had all these cool graphics to show.
I'm sorry,
as
you're just
well.
gonna have to describe them to the best of your ability, Dave.
Yeah, I've got
a technical issue I did not anticipate.
I wish I could at least hold like a computer up and show you what the graphics look like, but maybe it'll be a shorter show because I wouldn't want to look at me for an hour. Okay, I'll be honest with you. But I do want to. There's one thing I can show you, and that is something that I wanted to do as a giveaway. And we had a priest and a laywoman come into the studio yesterday, and these are two people, Father Edward and then Madame Alicia were their names, and they are from France. And he lives in Belgium now, and they are traveling the world and then really trying to promote the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And I found them absolutely delightful, did an interview with them, and she had a first-class relic of Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, who back in the, I forgot when that happened, that visit from Jesus to Margaret Mary Alacoque, but I think he said it was in the 1600s.
Yeah, it's in the 1600s. She lived from like 1647 to 1690.
Oh, okay. Well, look at you.
I pulled it up. I did not know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
But
well, you had the forethought to pull it up on the computer. So why am I saying this? Well, they left us these images of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and the Father Edward blessed them. And so I want to give this invitation to you, whether you're watching this live or on a recorded basis. If you will email us at backtothefather@grnonline.com, backtothefather@grnonline.com, and just give us your address. Tell us where you're from. I will mail one of these to you. Let's say the first 10 people, whether we get 10 or not, I don't know, but I have a limited number, and I want to give some away on some of the other shows as well. So first 10 people to respond by email, address to backtothefather@grnonline.com. I'm a little casual today because today is actually my day off because of last weekend we had that Spirit World Live event, which went very well. So thanks to people who did come for that. So I popped in to do this show, and then I'll pop right back out afterwards. But the topic today is the Eucharist, okay? And I'd love to get your feedback on it. And, we're in this time of Eucharistic revival that the church has called for, and I think everybody is going to go to Indianapolis this summer. So you're actually going to that, aren't you? The revival?
I am, yeah. So it's funny. The revival is happening the same week that we have our Guadalupe Radio Network family retreat. And I realized that after my friends and I were all excited about going. And so I'm actually going to leave the retreat a little bit early. I have to get to the airport at like 4 a.m. or something.
Oh, really?
And so I can fly to Indianapolis to meet my siblings there. And we're going to at least be able to participate Friday and Saturday and Sunday, which I think probably will be the most probably the days that most people are going to go.
When does it start? Like in the middle of the week?
I think it starts on a Wednesday afternoon or something. And so we're really just missing like a day and a half or so. But I'm excited. I've heard some other people from our DFW area that are going. So it'll be fun to just kind of cover and see what's happening there. Because my siblings and I were talking about it, and we're like, this is kind of a monumental thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not really that far. So they're driving up, and so we're going to drive all back. I'm just flying to meet them. So I don't know where we're staying yet, but I've heard that some churches are like offering their land for like
really?
putting up tents and things like that. Tenting.
Yeah, and probably Indiana during the summer
is a lot nicer than Texas, I imagine.
Probably be like in the 80s. It'd actually be good camping weather.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of what the most recent example of something like this would be. Because it's obvious it's not like a council like Vatican II, because that's more because this is the USCCB. This is just America. It's not the Universal Church. But have they had other congresses or?
That's a great question.
What would I'm just trying to think of when the last one or how unique this is.
I think we looked it up because I think it's been many years since a Congress like this. I think it happened, which is why my siblings and I were like, we should go.
All right. I'm cheating, and I saw that Nicole Marie has said hello, and and Cecil has already responded. So
I have.
I recognize Nicole Marie because she regularly is on the chat during Morning Joy, because I recognize her picture. She got this little tiny picture of her face there. So Nicole Marie, thank you for joining us. And all right, so I want to throw a question out there for anybody who's watching right now. Nicole Marie and beyond, we are on Twitter/X and Rumble. Well, I think we're on there as well. Good news. We now have reinstated our big Facebook page for Guadalupe Radio Network, and I don't think we're streaming today on that.
So the thing is, unfortunately, with that, we have a new Facebook page. Our other one got hacked, and unfortunately, we were unable to get it back. So we have to start over, but it's exciting and it's new. It's a clean slate. We have to get to a certain amount of likes, actually, I think, and followers before we're allowed to live stream. Kind of similar to like YouTube. I think you have to get to a certain amount before you can live stream.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
So we're not there yet, so I'd appreciate it if you follow us on Facebook, Guadalupe Radio Network. It's got our logo.
And if you're just joining us, like Nicole Marie, if you would like a copy of this beautiful, beautiful Sacred Heart poster, and it has the 12 promises of the Sacred Heart in the back, and also an act of consecration as well. Just go ahead and email backtothefather@grnonline.com. Backtothefather@grnonline.com, and let us know you'd like to have the image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful picture. So, all right, well, we are talking about the Eucharist today, and I want to start off by talking about the fact that, and I'm looking at this beautiful image of a priest holding up the Blessed Sacrament, and you can't see it because we can't get our PowerPoint on today, but why do so many people not believe in the real presence of Jesus? And I'd like to take a little bit of a different take on this. And I would say that the default would be not to believe in it, okay? Because if you take the average, children are so innocent and they believe, and you hold up what looks like a piece of bread or a chalice of wine, and you say, "Do you think this is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ?" Your average person is going to say, "No, that's crazy. That's ridiculous. It's bread. It's wine, right?" So I think we have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, most people don't believe, unfortunately, but why do they not believe? And I would say the onus of responsibility is upon the church and upon us to try to give people reasons to believe, because it's not like I said, it's not the default position to believe this, because it does defy the senses. And in some ways, unless you understand the reasoning behind it, it defies reason. Okay, because that doesn't. I'm looking at the picture of the host. That doesn't look like Jesus Christ. Body, blood, soul, divinity. And so the next slide I had was one of my favorite quotes from the Greek philosopher Aristotle, and it says, "Philosophy begins with wonder." Okay, and I've quoted that many times in the show before. And in order to believe in the real presence of the Eucharist, we have to restore a sense of wonder. We have to be able to look at something that looks like a piece of bread or a glass of wine and be able to wonder and say, wow, that actually is Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity. It doesn't seem like it is. It doesn't look like Jesus. It certainly doesn't look like God. But it also takes, as Thomas is going to remind us in the Summa Theologia, it takes faith, okay? And unfortunately, I think a lot of people's faith has been rocked by the Catholic Church because of scandals, because of things that have been going on. And maybe in some ways the default is like, you know what, I don't know that I trust you. And trust has to be rebuilt, because when you try to convince somebody to believe something that doesn't really seem like it would be, you really have to have amazing trust that you have built up, and maybe it's going to take some time to rebuild that trust. And maybe this is the very reason why there's going to be a Eucharistic Congress in the first place, because a lot of young people like Sissel and her friends go there and they walk away and say, wow, those talks really did convince me. Of course, now, Sissel, you probably don't need convincing. You already believe it. I trust that you probably do.
Yes, I do. I
Okay.
do. Yeah, it doesn't. I didn't have my microphone on, but I was saying yes, I do. But I think it's gonna like kind of reinvigorate you, because even I think most people who are even very devout Catholics, you know, going to mass frequently, obviously weekly at least, but can sometimes you almost like null the senses of that, you know, it really is Jesus there in the presence. So I think it's a good just reminder to kind of revive that.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, and again, I think it's a steep curve to get people to believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And so here's the other reason why it's a very challenging thing, okay? Now, of course, it takes faith, and somebody can respond to faith and not have to have a whole bunch of explanations. And, you know, it's like the lady that was here yesterday with the Sacred Heart image. She mentioned many times, she said, I'm not like an intellectual. I don't have a lot of, you know, intellectual knowledge of my faith. She says, I just believe and I love Jesus. And God bless people that are that way, and they don't need to have all the reasons and all the explanations. But this is St. Thomas Aquinas, and a show dedicated to him, so we do a lot of stuff having to do with the intellect, right? So in order to believe in the real presence of the Eucharist, you first of all have to understand that the Eucharist, of course, is Jesus, and Jesus is both God and man, all wrapped up in one person, right? Divine nature, human nature, divine will, divine intellect, human intellect, and that's a lot to unpack. And so if you want to take the intellectual approach to the Eucharist, you have to first of all make that leap and say, okay, I believe it's Jesus. But then you have to ask yourself, well, what is Jesus? Jesus is God. So do you understand God? Do you understand what it even means? Who is God? What is God, right? And Thomas spends a lot of time at the beginning of the Summa explaining what God is, who God is, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, what he is, simple and perfect and good and infinite and immutable and eternal and one. Goes into all the explanations, and he is love, he is mercy, he is his intellect, he is his will. And that might be kind of mind-boggling to think about all these different things. But just remember, ultimately, the first attribute of God is that he is simple, okay? And it's only because of our limited ability to understand these things that it seems complicated to us, okay? So that's why I think the first attribute of God is his simplicity. Okay, so you got to understand God, and then you also have to understand human nature, okay? So if Jesus is fully human, what does it mean to be a human, okay? And that's something that Thomas goes into a lot of explanation in the Summa as well. And then, of course, you have to understand what's called the hypostatic union of divine nature, human nature, coming together in a single person. And a hypostasis is a fancy word for like an individual thing, like this has a hypostasis, and my phone has a hypostasis. It just means it's an individual thing. But Jesus,
I'm going to start using that just in regular everyday speech. I'm going to be like,
see, that's why philosophers are the best people at cocktail parties.
Again, Dave, I feel like this happened on a share-a-thon once where Toya asked you, when was the last time you went to a cocktail party?
Oh man, not on. Well, I mean, I think we actually do that pretty often. I'd say like the Catholic Foundation event.
Oh, okay. They have like a cocktail hour. Like a cocktail, that's true.
But you're thinking of like, people with like these long cigars.
Yes,
and
I'm sitting there going like,
drinking martinis.
I have hosted a cocktail party at my house. Yeah.
It sounds kind of hoity-toity though.
It does sound a little. I feel like you have to dress up. And yes, and use, and I don't know what a hoity-toity accent would be, but I feel like you have to talk.
You're going to talk British.
You got to talk British, do you? I can only do the Cockney accent, so that's not at all hoity-toity.
Yeah. So no, I'm doing. In all seriousness, study philosophy. Okay, I'll challenge you. Okay, take a course in Thomistic philosophy, watch this show for about a year, and then go to cocktail parties and tell me if you don't feel more comfortable talking to any single person about anything, because you can always draw it back to the human person. You can always draw it back to God. You can, use fancy words like hypostasis and suppositum and,
So learn philosophy so you can show off a little bit at your next cocktail party.
yeah, maybe that should be our slogan,
that
right?
should be that's what it should be. We should have shirts with that, being like, talk to me about philosophy or something like that.
Yeah, okay. So that probably, isn't the best way of putting it. But
I
you
can
get to, because we are relational people and we love, most of us, that's why 2020 was such a horrible year, is because we all had to, stand 6 feet away from each other. We want to be with each other, and to be with each other, we have to conversate or converse.
Conversate. I don't think I've heard that one before.
Yeah, converse with people, and anyways. All right, that is definitely
not to derail the
departure.
conversation at all, but because I was going to bring this up later on, so I won't I'm just going to briefly say my young adult group met last night, and at the end of the night, there was a philosophical debate happening in the parking lot of a Whataburger, as they do for the young adult group. So I'm going to talk to you at the end of the show, because I want to ask you if this is a possible show topic we can have for a future show.
Why don't you say it now?
Because I need to make sure I have my information right. But it's talking about a very common thing that's idea that's brought up in like philosophical classes in college and stuff like that, and wondering how Aquinas would answer it. Let's put it that way.
Good. I'm looking forward to that. All right. So, and understand the Eucharist, you got to understand that it's Jesus. You have to understand that Jesus is fully God and fully man, and that he came together in the hypostatic union. There's a lot, and maybe just my theory, and go ahead and comment in the comment section of whatever platform you're watching. Maybe that's one of the reasons why so few people understand the Eucharist, is because unless you just take it on faith and say, I just believe and I don't need to know all the reasons, but maybe other people do need to know the reasons, and maybe we're just not educating people enough about the reality behind the Eucharist. Okay, so let me know what you think about that theory. I tend to think that that's the case, and let me know what you think. Okay, so let me go through a few of the articles in the Summa about the Blessed Sacrament, about the Eucharist, the source and summit of the Christian life. And since I only have one person in my view, it's Sissel, so I got to bounce a few things off of Sissel, and because during the Sherathon I get to bounce stuff off of Toya. But,
so that's just my turn.
All right, so Thomas asks in Tertia Pars, question 73, Article 3, whether the Eucharist is necessary for salvation.
Whoa, he pulled out the big guns.
Is the Eucharist, and anybody out there who is watching in social media land, is the Eucharist necessary for salvation?
So I'm going to do a nice Thomas thing and answer my question with another question.
Okay. There you go. That's
are you talking
fair.
about the Eucharist just like in general, the Eucharist consecrated on earth, we have the Eucharist, or is it like consuming the Eucharist necessary towards salvation?
Okay. So, I think it would be the latter. Does someone need to literally consume the Eucharist in order to be saved? And as a former Protestant, that's probably a very pertinent question, because, because you could think about it and say, well, if that's the case, then we have a good portion of the world that there's no way they can be saved, right?
Right.
Because they've never received the Eucharist.
My thinking would be is that it's kind of one of those things where obviously the Eucharist is like the source and sum of our faith, so it's an incredibly important part of our faith. At the same time, God is all powerful, and I imagine that there are Protestants who have not consumed the Eucharist outside of the church, and are outside of the church, that God, I don't think we could put a cap on his ability to bring them home to him. You know what I mean?
That God is not bound by the sacraments.
He's not bound that way. But I would say it's kind of like one of those things where it's, like the joke where it's like, okay, well, I don't have to go to church every Sunday to, go to heaven. It's like, well, you don't have to wear a parachute when you jump out of a plane, but it certainly helps. You know what I mean? If you want to have a good chance of actually going. So I'd say because I think the exact words he says was absolutely necessary.
So what he says,
I'd say no.
I think you're on the right track here. And what he says is that it's, you got to go back and first of all say, the Eucharist is Jesus. Okay, so if you did not desire Jesus, do you think you can go to heaven? Okay, if you had no desire for Jesus, you're not going to go to heaven. So what he says is the actual reception of the Eucharist is not absolutely necessary. Okay, now people are like, well, what about John 6? Unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you shall not have any life within you. That's a good point, because he seems to say that you have to. But again, God is not bound by the sacraments. So what Thomas says is, before receiving a sacrament, the reality of the sacrament can be had through the very desire of receiving the sacrament. Accordingly, before actual reception of the sacrament, a man can obtain salvation through the desire of receiving it. Now, notice he says before receiving it. Okay, so I think he's talking about maybe somebody who hasn't yet maybe had their first Eucharist, but it almost seems to imply that, if you desire Jesus and you've been taught that the Eucharist is Jesus, I think you need to receive the Eucharist, because, can you imagine believing that the Eucharist is really the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus and still not receiving it? I don't think that person can be saved.
Yeah, that would be quite, if you've been like convinced of that and you're told about it and you're like, okay, cool. And then you're just like, yeah, but I'm not, it's too much work to become Catholic and start receiving the Eucharist or something like that. Then yeah, that's a serious problem. That's a problem of the heart, really. Yeah.
And I just still, it blows me away to think if you actually, like, let's say, because I just use myself as an example. I receive the Eucharist and I go back to the pew, and sometimes I get distracted and I think about what am I going to have for lunch. And but if you really believed in what you are consuming, I don't even know if you could. You would be so blown away that I don't even know. It just. I don't know. It's just such an amazing thing, and I think most of us, again, we've stopped wondering. We've stopped really taking the time to really contemplate what this means. And again, I'm sure this is all going to come out at the Eucharistic Congress, and God bless them for putting this on. All right, the next question we have, and by the way, we got an email about the Sacred Heart of Jesus signed, what do we call this? Card? Holy card? It's
picture.
Pretty, picture, holy card,
image.
holy image, yeah. Okay, so the names of the sacrament, okay? So what Thomas says here is he says four names. One is sacrifice, one is communion, one is viaticum, and one is Eucharist. Okay, and it's interesting because he says the name sacrifice refers to the past. Okay, that's referring to what happened in the past. Even the sacrifices of the Old Testament that prefigure the Eucharist. Communion has to do with what he calls ecclesial unity, okay, bringing the body of Christ together, okay? That's why the communal aspect of the church is so important. Have you heard of viaticum, that expression, viaticum?
It sounds like a vitamin.
Well, yeah, it does.
It sounds like a vitamin.
Make sure you take your viaticum every day, right? Yeah. Okay.
I don't think.
Yeah, viaticum literally means food for the journey.
So it could be a vitamin.
Food for the journey. Via means way or road, right? And then ticum must mean food. So it's food for the journey. And it is if I were to say, what is the last sacrament that a person should receive before they die? And most people just instinctively said, anointing of the sick, right? But that's not actually true. The last sacrament you should receive, if you're still able to, swallow, is the Eucharist. All right, because then you have Jesus in you as you go to receive Jesus, and so that's kind of a pretty cool thing. All right, so and then the other one is Eucharist itself, which means thanksgiving. The word Eucharist itself means thanksgiving. All right, when and where was the Eucharist instituted? You know this one, right?
I really hope. Now I'm questioning everything. Is that the Last Supper?
Yeah, good. Okay, Last Supper, and why was it instituted in the Last Supper? Maybe somebody out there in social media land can take a guess on this one, and Nicole is thinking, oh, the pressure. No pressure on you, Nicole, because I know there's a few other people watching as well. Why the Last Supper? Okay, and if you're listening to Morning Joy the other day with Keith Downey, I explained this. Okay, why the Last Supper? Why not, Capernaum, or why not, some other time? What was the significance of the Last Supper to institute the Eucharist? And if anybody wants to take a guess at this one, go ahead and.
Is it a really obvious answer?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Not to make you feel like.
I'll let the people guess.
Okay.
Is it because it was both like one of the last time that Jesus was with his disciples, and it was
exactly
that was it. So it's showing how the importance of it, that it was.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if you were, let's say I'm leaving my family, okay, and I'm going off to war, and I may never see him again. And I look at my son and I give him, a holy card, or I give him something that every time he sees that, he thinks of me. Or, if I want to be vain, I could give him like a picture of myself, and like, son, or, that's not really vain. I mean, if hey, here's a picture of you and me together or something. So it's a reminder. It's something that, but it's not just it's not just a picture or a holy card. He's actually leaving himself. And so as he's gathering with his apostles and he knows he's about to die in a few days, he wants to leave something with them that they can use to remember him. Okay? Okay, so that is that. The chief figure of the Eucharist from the Old Testament. Okay, what is the chief figure of one day?
Say that again.
Okay, the chief like Old Testament figure of the Eucharist from the Old Testament.
Would it be Moses?
It's not a person.
Oh, not a person. That's
that's a good guess.
Okay,
but,
wait. So wait,
well,
you're
interestingly, what would I say if you said who's the chief person? I
in
would
the Old
say,
Testament?
Yeah, guys.
Well, it's kind of hard because you have Moses. He's the one who was the one who got the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
And also a lot of the old law and stuff like that is through Moses. But then you also have David, and David's very important because, like, you think about the Melchizedek.
Yeah.
Or Elijah or Isaac.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of them, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot. Okay, manna, and Nicole got it. See, I had the right person. I just had the wrong.
Now, you say she got it. How do you know she got it?
Manna, I'm assuming.
Well, no, that actually is a very good guess.
But it's not it?
No, it's not. That would be like.
See, Nicole's confused now because she's saying, a person. No, we got it. I made the mistake. It was my fault. I thought it was a person. I thought he was talking about a person.
Manna seems like the most obvious
thing. Wait. What else? Okay. So it's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing. And let me
Is
see
it the Ark of the Covenant?
Well, see, that's a great guess as well. Okay, let me.
See, when you say it's a great guess, I just feel worse.
Good. Okay, the blank. It's 2 words. The blank foreshadowed this sacrament in these 3 ways. First of all, because it was eaten with unleavened loaves. Okay. And then in Exodus 12, they shall eat flesh and unleavened bread. It was immolated by the entire multitude of the children of Israel on the 14th day of the moon, and this was a figure of the Passion of Christ, who is called the blank on account of his innocence.
The lamb.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, flipping Passover.
Did Nicole get it?
No, she didn't. But poor Nicole. She's like pressure, and I just I'm confused now. I got all confused. Yeah, the lamb. That would make sense. Jesus is the Lamb of God.
Being the only person
commenting.
Commenting, and so Nicole. And also, if she leaves, we're like, where'd Nicole go?
She's like, dishes are calling to me. I need to go do something. I need to go work.
We love having you here, but believe me, there's no pressure. Okay, you don't even have to respond. We're just glad you're here.
Hey, she did get lamb.
All right. Okay, the Paschal lamb is the symbol of the Eucharist.
That makes more sense.
So, all right. So, whether the body of Christ is in very truth or merely as a figure or a sign. And if we had PowerPoint up here right now, I'd show you a whole bunch of signs. Have I done this before on this show?
I think
before?
You have done the signs portion.
Okay, the signs, for example, the Hollywood sign, right? And you look at the Hollywood sign and all these images come up of like your favorite movie, or maybe you get kind of roiled because you don't like Hollywood, or you think of these, arrogant, crazy actors. But what it is that it's just a sign, right? The sign is not Hollywood. The sign is just something that makes you think of Hollywood. And what Thomas is going to say is that's kind of, in a way, like the Old Testament sacrifices were something that represented the Eucharist and represented Jesus and his sacrifice. But the Eucharist itself is not just a sign, it's reality.
Ta-da. Don't
right?
worry, Dave. You don't have your PowerPoint. I've got you covered.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so that's okay. You've got
the Hollywood sign.
This is like old school.
It's also really funny because my phone's in black and white,
yeah,
so it's
I
not
know.
helping.
Why do you do black and white?
Aw,
I've never understand
man.
that. You've chosen to have all your images in black and white?
I get a lot of hate for it, but I do it because I don't want to be on my phone as much. When your phone's not aesthetically pleasing, like you don't want to sit there and watch tons of videos or scroll on social media.
You see what?
Nicole is actually
said,
working.
I will not call your boss.
Yeah, don't worry, Nicole.
Okay.
Your secret is safe with us. You are just tell her that you're elevating your mind whilst working.
And you're also getting better for cocktail parties. I wonder if Nicole, have you ever been to a cocktail party? Like drink a martini and walk around and have small talk conversation with people and say, have you ever heard of the hypostatic union? You know? Oh, I'll tell you.
Yeah, the next time that you do anything in person with your work, Nicole, you're ready.
Yeah, so, okay. So, okay. So we all know this. It's not just a sign. It's actually the body and blood in Jesus, okay? So, all right, now the next one's kind of interesting, okay? Have you ever thought, like, why do the accidents not change every time there is a consecration of the Eucharist, right? Because if you saw the PowerPoint, I would show a picture of the Eucharist before consecration and a picture of the Eucharist after consecration, and it's exactly the same as far as what we see, right? It doesn't change. And so how would it change the world if every single time a priest consecrated the Eucharist, it actually turned into the species of human flesh? Okay, so okay, now this is a distinction because you're like, well, it does turn into the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, okay, but not the species of human flesh. That's like the stuff of Eucharistic miracles. But what if every single time there was a consecration of the Eucharist, it did actually happen, like one of those Eucharistic miracles where it's like actual flesh and blood, and it's got like, hair coming out of it. It's, Thomas has 3 reasons why that doesn't happen. Okay, see if you can guess any of these. Why would that not be the case? Okay, anybody?
Why would it not be the case that it changes every single time? Like, actually, if you can physically see it.
Yeah, right. You can fit that like that.
You might be less inclined to eat it. That's just the first thought off of my head.
Well, I'm going to give you that one because the first one he says is, I love this, and he said, first of all, because it is not customary but horrible for men to eat human flesh and to drink blood.
There you go.
Okay, it's horrible. It's not customary. And therefore, Christ's flesh and blood are set before us to be partaken under the species of those things which are more commonly used by men, namely bread and wine. Okay, so you got one. Okay, do you want to take a guess at another one?
Do I? Let's see. Do I want to stay on a high
that
I got one?
or just quit while you're ahead,
just quit.
right?
Is it because it's kind of like us needing the faith aspect of it and not always having to see it?
Yes. I feel like I'm on Family Feud, and you've got the
the top
3 answers. So you just got number 3.
Oh, amazing.
So you got number 1, you got number 3.
Okay, Nicole, I've carried my weight. Your turn.
Yeah, so she just called you a slacker, Nicole, by the way.
I just said that I did my portion.
Okay, she's like... Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So there's one more, and let me see. Yeah, I don't know if you'd get this one, but you got 2 out of 3.
Is that 2 out of 3?
That's a 66. That's an F.
Do I get a? Oh, thanks. Do I get a hint or anything on the last one?
Yeah, the last one has to do with like how people would respond, like unbelievers. Like, what would they think if
that we're cannibals?
Aha, exactly.
Oh,
no, what he said was, lest this sacrament might be derided by unbelievers if we were to eat our Lord under his own species.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, and that was one of the criticisms of Christians in the early church, is that we were cannibals, right?
Right, which is the whole reason why it's kind of like crazy that Protestants have a hard time with this idea. You're like, you recognize that like people were freaking out when he said.
Yeah, exactly, and they walked away, and to whom should we turn, and all that from John 6, right? All right, so that's that. And then is grace bestowed in this sacrament? Of course it is. We're receiving Jesus, and he is the fount of all grace. And, okay, now I like this one. Like, what effect? Let me ask you and Nicole.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, and no shame, okay, but when's the last time you had a mass said for somebody else, okay?
It was probably last year, I think.
Okay.
I think I had one said for my mom on her birthday.
Okay.
I think that was the last time. Our church is always very booked on that. It's hard to get on the book. So it's been a minute. I know there's another local church near mine, Our Lady of Lebanon, that they've got a smaller congregation, so it's easier to get on that one. And I was just thinking about this last week, too. I was like, oh, I need to do another mass for my mom. So, yeah, it's been a while, though.
You know, and it's one of those things where, and I don't know the answer to this. Maybe somebody out there does. But let's say I go to Mass and I say, Lord, I offer this Mass up today for my wife, okay? Or my father who has passed away, okay? But then somebody else, pays the usual stipend of, $10 or whatever and officially makes the Mass, for their intention. What's the difference? Does God honor it more because it was the official, dedication of the Mass, and as opposed to something that you just bring to it? I don't know the answer to that, but, because Thomas says whether this sacrament benefits others besides the recipient.
Well, sorry. I was going to say on that regard, this is not an official answer, but my wondering is if when you have it, the Mass said, the priest announce it, so then everyone in the congregation is then praying for the person too. So I guess that might be the difference.
And
maybe
it'd be kind of inappropriate to scream out, "This Mass is
for my mom."
Had the same effect though, right?
It would have, although you might get escorted out.
Please pray for her. Okay, this sacrament is not only a sacrament, but also a sacrifice. For it has the nature of a sacrifice, inasmuch as in this sacrament, get this, Christ's passion is represented, whereby Christ offered himself a victim to God. And it has the nature of a sacrament, inasmuch as invisible grace is bestowed in this sacrament under a visible species. So then, this sacrament benefits recipients by way both of sacrament and of sacrifice, because it is offered for all who partake of it. But to others who do not receive it, it is beneficial by way of sacrifice, inasmuch as it is offered for their salvation. All right, so, I think, we should do that more often, because I remember I have a godson, and his name is Andres Hernandez. And I remember when it came to his birthday last year, his parents said, Andres is a pretty special kid, so I bet you he's on board with this, because we said, what can we get him for his birthday? And they said the best thing that you could get would be like a Mass, and I mean, how many people would say that? Like if somebody says, I was either going to get you a $100 gift card to, Chick-fil-A, or I'm going to have a Mass said for you, from a kind of, one of them is like infinitely better than the other. But the other one's like, man, I sure like that Chick-fil-A, So anyways, a little bit of a gut check there. No pun intended, all right? Okay, so moving on. We just have a couple more questions here, and then we're going to finish up. Okay, Ken915 says that the Eucharist should not be given to, people who produce scandal in the church, right? So Thomas, interestingly, okay, we're in an election year, and so this is gonna come up again. Should Joe Biden or any pro-abortion politician be receiving the Eucharist, and why are the bishops and cardinals not denying them? And I think it's a legitimate question, but it comes up every year, especially during election years, right? So this was also a thing back in the 13th century. Have we talked about this one before, or do you remember this one? Those are two different questions, of course, but
it's not. Yeah, I think I do remember it, because I think we talked about it during our election cycle at some point.
Every 4 years.
Probably 4 years ago.
Every 4 years we have this show.
If this show has been around that long,
we should just replay it. I mean, we don't have to come in and actually do the show.
Well, I'll just edit bangs onto my past self and just be like, it's me now, guys.
All right, so now here's a question. This is something I'd love to get a little bit of interaction from Nicole and the voluminous other folks who are watching the program right now. Okay, so Thomas asks whether the priest ought to deny the body of Christ to the sinner seeking it. All right, and what he's going to do is he's going to come down and say, well, if they're open sinners and it's open and it's public, then no, they shouldn't receive the Eucharist. But he says if it's private, if it's secretive, it's then the priest may not even know that they're sinning, and so he shouldn't deny them for that, right?
Yeah.
So And that, nothing's changed. I mean, that's still the teaching of the church, 750 years later. But the thing that's interesting, though, is who does St. Thomas Aquinas identify as public sinners? Okay, and he doesn't mention politicians. But again, this doesn't mean this is the only ones, but he uses some examples. Okay. You probably don't remember. Do you want to take a wild guess?
Oh gosh, at who he's?
Yeah. There's 4 different kind of groups of people, and Nicole, if you want to take a stab at this, you can.
Not politicians. Like politicians are like the ones that we think of. I would probably think of the people, politicians, lawyers.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but are lawyers public? I mean,
I guess
sometimes they are.
I guess public criminals of some sort.
Really? He uses robbers.
Oh, okay. I just figured that. See, my thought was the reason why I originally was going to say that is like if you're a robber with like a wanted poster or something, if they had that in Aquinas' day, would you really be showing up to church anyway to receive?
You look so familiar.
And it's just like, just don't mind me.
But what's interesting is that there was that time in history, it was kind of like the 1920s, where you had these public
mobsters
bandits,
kind of person. Oh,
but like Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh yeah, Bonnie and Clyde. Yeah, coming up.
And Babyface Floyd, and you had these like notorious. But Bonnie and Clyde are probably the most famous ones, right? But these, and to your point, it's not like Bonnie and Clyde are going to show up at mass to read the Eucharist, but they could, privately they could call their a priest and say, hey, this is Clyde Barrow.
Yeah.
Can I receive the Eucharist?
Right.
And I think the point is that priest would have to say no.
Well, if you think also back in like the times when there was a lot more mobsters up in like Chicago and in Ohio, like Mother Angelica
Al
grew
Capone
up. Yeah, all of them, like they were well-known people who did go around. They just had a lot of control. Imagine them walking, and most of them were Catholic of Catholic descent, and so I could just imagine them showing up and being like, okay, yeah, give me the Eucharist. And that priest would have to decide in that moment. I mean, the priest, I don't think it was necessarily connected with someone trying to receive the Eucharist, but the priest that Mother Angelica grew up with was murdered by the mob in Ohio.
Yeah.
So
did that come out in her book?
It's in her book, yeah.
Oh,
They talked about that.
So, all right. So the robbers he mentions. He also mentions, and this is kind of an interesting one. We could do a whole show on this, is usurers. Okay, so this would be people who loan money on interest, okay?
Loan sharks.
Loan sharks. And, so this would be something that I guess it's public. I don't know how it would be public. Maybe they're doing, like nowadays they could do commercials on TV, but back then there would not have been television or commercials like that. But, maybe they're posting signs, hey, I'll loan you, money on interest. The other one, and I had an interesting conversation with Keith. It's kind of funny because he mentions actors. Okay, think about it. If an actor is doing bad movies, okay, think of a Catholic actor. Mark Wahlberg used to do.
He did some questionable movies, very questionable movies.
But you never hear anybody bringing that up. Who's another actor? Most if they're Catholic, they're no longer practicing their faith, right?
Or they're not doing those kind of movies.
Yeah, right. I mean, let's just say hypothetically, and I don't think this would ever happen, but let's just say Jim Caviezel
did something sketchy,
goes and does some movie where he's in a really bad scene, or he's doing something, or like a shoot 'em up movie or something like that. It's actually a legitimate question. I mean, that's public. You're acting, but and what if he,
I think I guess it would kind of depend on like how far it's going, and also probably the theme of the movie. Are you portraying those actions as something good and to be praised? Because obviously, like in a lot of movies, okay, a bad guy's going to do a lot of awful things, murder people, and do really awful things, but we're also not rooting for him. We know he's the bad guy.
Yeah, so it's still acting.
So it's acting, but like if there's very unnecessary things that have nothing to do with the plot line, do those need to be like like we're talking about like explicit sex scenes that don't need to be there.
Gratuitous
that just don't need to be there, have no purpose in the plot at all. You're really just like devaluing the human person when you do that. That's like a whole other thing.
Yeah. And also in his personal life, because if someone like Jim Caviezel did
it's caught in a scandal or something.
An affair or something like that, that would be public because he's a public figure. So, whereas if somebody else did it, it might not. It's not public. It's still a sin, but the priest may not deny it.
So,
right?
I do have a question though on this. If the hard thing I find about, especially when it comes to like actors with politicians, okay, when they make their money off of saying, abortion's okay. That's one thing, because it's so clear what they are saying and doing. When it comes to like actors who've been in movies, especially when it's been a while since the movies have gone on, I wonder, a priest ever have to be like, well, have they gone to confession since then? Like, you know what I mean? Do they have to decide, or do they just say, well, they did that one thing 10 years ago, they may not have confessed it, I'm not going to give you communion.
Yeah, right. I would say, gosh, yeah, that's a tough call, because so you're saying like Joe Biden, he's pro-abortion. There's a lot of things that are contrary to the Catholic faith, and you're saying if like 5 years from now he's no longer president, and the particular priest doesn't kind of know what he stands for anymore, because he's not a public figure anymore.
Yeah, sure.
But he hasn't publicly renounced those previous positions.
Well, I'm thinking more like someone like Mark Wahlberg. Politicians, like I said, it gets a little sketchy because they've literally made their whole campaign and money off of that. But like I'm talking about like Mark Wahlberg was in some sketchy films, but he's kind of coming back into his faith now. Would a priest now be like, well, I don't know if he ever confessed it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Or does he have to very publicly say like, how would the priest decide? That's why I think it gets a little complicated.
Yeah, it does get complicated,
especially in the world of social media and stuff like that.
I think politicians are pretty obvious, because
right.
if you would have to change your policy,
right?
A guy like Joe Biden would have to say, I am no longer pro-abortion. I'm no longer supporting these things that are contrary to my Catholic faith. And until he does that, you'd have to presume that he has not yet renounced them, and he shouldn't receive the Eucharist, right? All right, so that is an interesting, fun conversation. And he also mentions magicians, which I find interesting.
Magicians, not like witches and that kind of stuff, like witchcraft, or is it just like magicians, just like pull a rabbit out of my hat?
Yeah, but I think there's a distinction, because there's obviously a lot of people who are like Catholic magicians,
right?
But none of them claim that the reason they're able to do this is because of some kind of like spiritual effect.
They're not actually using any magic.
Yeah, it's not magic.
It's all tricks.
It's sleight of hand.
Yeah.
So I think as long as the presumption is this is just sleight of hand, and I'm doing kind of tricky stuff with the way I'm kind of tricking you, that's nothing wrong. But I think some magicians, like the magicians like in Scripture, that were I think more relying on evil spirits,
right?
For that would be,
that's going into like witchcraft though, and stuff like that. So that's
problematic.
We just call it something different now.
Yeah. So all right. So the very last thing is that we'll talk about on this program is whether Christ is sacrificed in the sacrament. Okay, so is it an actual sacrifice in the sacrament? Okay, and what would you say to that? Is the Mass a sacrifice?
Oh my! Hold on a second. I thought you were gonna leave like a
Nicole,
nice easy question
at
the end here.
Yeah, this is kind of a this is a little.
I'm gonna plead the fifth on this one.
Okay, so because remember, what do you think about it? You would say I'm going
the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
Exactly,
yeah, so yes,
the holy sacrifice of the Mass. So why would they call it a sacrifice of the Mass if it wasn't a sacrifice of the Mass?
I knew that.
And there you go. So what he says is, and I'll just read this. He says the celebration of this sacrament is called a sacrifice for two reasons. First, because, as Augustine says, the images of things are called by the names of the things whereof they are the images. Okay. But the celebration of this sacrament is an image representing Christ's passion, which is his true sacrifice. Accordingly, the celebration of this sacrament is called Christ's sacrifice. Secondly, it's called a sacrifice in respect of the effect of his passion, because to wit, by this sacrament, we are made partakers of the fruit of our Lord's passion. Okay, so then what he's going to do is say, even the Old Testament sacrifices were a sacrifice in the sense that it pointed towards the reality of the Eucharist, but it's only the New Testament sacrifice that is, in the second sense, a real sacrifice, okay? But I've always heard the apologists say it's not a bloody sacrifice, and Jesus is not being killed again, but it's a representation of that original sacrifice on Calvary. So it would be accurate to say that Jesus is sacrificed at the Mass, but in a representation of the original sacrifice, okay? All right. Well, that is Back to the Father today. I hope that you learned something about the Eucharist that you didn't previously know. And we are very grateful for everybody who participated. And Nicole, you stuck with us the entire show. Okay. Nicole's also the one that asked for the image of the Sacred Heart. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we were to give an award for the best participant of this show, who would get your vote? You? No.
I don't get it.
No.
All
I don't know. I think Nicole may have even done better than you. I mean, you did pretty well. You did pretty well.
Well, now I'm just sad.
The non-employee participant of this show. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to go and decide who it is.
Okay,
and then
we'll have
announce
a little.
it next year.
Yeah, we'll give an announcement.
No, I'm kidding. Nicole Marie, thank you very much for participating. And we're glad for anybody else. So there may be a few of you who are like, I just want to watch. I don't want to.
Hey, being a lurker is great too.
That's right. We appreciate you just as much as we appreciate Nicole. All right. So will there be a show next week?
Well, I'm not going to be here.
Okay.
But I'll be in Hawaii.
So you're saying
there's no Sissel, there's no show.
No show. No
I'm
Sissel.
saying that you're just going to have a different producer. So
yeah, because last week that Joe was
half of the time. I was the producer half the time, and then he was produced the other half of the time. So I just need to make sure they're all lined up to take care of you all next week.
Yeah.
But please don't do the topic that I'm about to tell you about.
Oh yeah. Wait, what now? Tell us
so
what is
we
it?
came up with talking about the very common philosophical and thought story is the trolley problem. You know that one?
The trolley problem.
The trolley.
Oh,
problem.
trolley.
So you have the trolley that's speeding down the trolley tracks, and you have a switch in front of you, and there are 10 people on one track, stuck on that one track, and one person on the other one. Do you switch it so it hits the one person and not the 10 people? Or do you do anything? What is the most moral thing to do? Have you heard that one? Have you heard?
Oh, okay. So the normal path would be to hit the 10.
It would be you hit the 10, and so you have to decide: do you pull this lever?
Right. So you're saying you're making a deliberate choice.
You are making a deliberate choice that you are going to get involved and someone's going to die, but it's going to be a less loss of life. And so everyone was kind of wondering: would the most moral thing to do, would it be to do nothing?
Yeah, because you haven't it's out of your control that the 10 people are going to die, right?
Yeah.
There's and this is a very, very similar thing that I've heard, and I'll phrase it in a different way, is that they say a guy shows up for this jungle tribe of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the chief of the tribe has 10 people tied up to trees or whatever, and he says, I'm going to kill these 10 people. It's almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
He said, I am going to kill these 10 people. But he says, I'm going to hand you a gun, and if you kill one of them, I'll spare the other 9.
Mm.
Okay, it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, the same idea.
Okay, same thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ones for this one.
So the thing is that you have to deliberately make the decision. I would say that, using the principles that I would be used to, saying that you can't kill the one.
So you just do nothing.
Yeah,
you do. That's what we were kind of coming to the conclusion on. Again, there's a lot of different versions of this plot of what you have to do. So many people on a boat. If you kick one person off the boat, then it'll survive. The lifeboat, it'll survive.
It's good. I think it's called consequentialism. Because you're doing, and it's also might be related to utilitarianism. Probably not as much, but consequentialism is do we act according just to the consequences? Okay, the other question, and this is you could bring about world peace for the history, the rest of the world, but you have to torture one small child to death, okay, in order to do that. But it's going to bring, now utilitarianism would say the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Right.
So they would say, you do that. But I think the principles are that we would go by is that the end doesn't justify the means,
right.
And so you can't do that. Even if the consequence of your action is going to be something great, you can't do it.
Well, we also, because apparently it's been going around a lot on Twitter or X recently about the dropping the atomic bombs in Japan. That's kind of a similar thing.
Yeah, because it ended the war.
Yeah, because it ended the war, but it took 2 of them, and they still almost didn't,
kill a lot of innocent people.
It was a civilian target. It wasn't a military target. So it's kind of one of those hard things But again, anyhow, those were our deep thoughts the other day. But it would be interesting maybe one time to do a show about some of those very popular I don't know, things you have to think through, like what would be the most like the most morally just thing to do. And just answer them from Aquinas.
All right. Well, that'll be the topic next week.
Hey, I'm not going to be here.
No, we won't do that. I don't know what the topic is, but we'll think of something fun. So, all right. It is 54 minutes after, but we are not bound to a clock in this show because we're not on the radio. We're on social media. So I'm going to make the executive decision to end this program. And with a very sincere thank you to all who are watching it live or those who are watching it also on a recorded basis. And don't forget, if you would like to have a copy of this beautiful image blessed by a priest of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, email backtothefather@grnonline.com. Backtothefather@grnonline.com. God bless you. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at grnonline.com.